If I put on my astrologer's hat to assess the January 5th Georgia runoff elections, I consider the charts of the four contestants as well as those of Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. To a lesser extent, I also look at those of Biden and Harris, Trump's, and the USA national chart. In this video, I will look at the charts of the four trying to win in Georgia. The problem that arises immediately is that I don't have birth times for any of the four trying to win the seat, which means my astrovisibility is quite limited. Now, when I compare the Loeffler versus Warnock battle, I am somewhat hopeful for Warnock. Loeffler has Jupiter and Saturn upcoming support for her Sun degree, but current Uranus trouble for her Venus, and current and upcoming Pluto threatening energy to her Mars. And most troubling and dangerous to her popularity and objectives, Neptune moving into solid square to her Mercury during all of 2021 and 2022. Meanwhile, in Raphael's case, the natal sextile between Jupiter, Uranus, and Mars is getting very nice supportive energy from transiting Jupiter and Saturn in early Aquarius, and Pluto is transiting trine itself. But the more defining cycles would have to be transiting Jupiter and Saturn on the other end of his Sun and Mercury in Leo, while Neptune squares his Venus, and even does so at election time. To be honest, this isn't a great situation, but at least in Warnock's case, they are aspects that are elapsing as Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune move forward, whereas in Kelly's, the hits on Mercury and Mars become a full-on situation during 2021. On this basis, and optimistically putting aside the obvious counterpoint, which would be to say the stress in her chart could just mean a busier upcoming Senate year, if I go with the fading cycle versus the yet-to-peak stress cycle, I would cautiously give the edge to Warnock, but honestly without much conviction, because that Neptune square is enough to make me very nervous. In the Ossoff-Perdue standoff, I am taken aback by what I see as Perdue's obvious corruption and cowardice in his behavior, even while his chart is featuring a Jupiter return followed by a conjunction to Venus right around the same time. This would normally signal a tremendous advantage to his cause. It doesn't get much better than Jupiter cycles like this. The downside would be that Saturn is also involved by conjoining the exact same spot, and since it is conjunct Mars and square the natal Sun, it is quite possible that there will be birth times that could sink his ship. For example, a natal 12th house Saturn would signify a big problem, even with Jupiter transiting nearby an important point. Perdue's other problem is transiting Neptune in a tight square to his Sun at the time of the vote. The counter-argument to the tremendous danger this square poses is that natal Neptune, absent a birth time to complicate matters, is a pretty supportive birth planet, which does take the edge off the peril of the transit square. To make matters worse for predicting, when I look at Ossoff's day positions, I don't find much to point to other than that Jupiter and Saturn are now in his Sun sign, and this does say that 2021 and 2022 represent very important years, with 21 being especially so due to Jupiter's one-year pass through Aquarius. Is this enough to win? It could be with the right ascendant, but absent that knowledge, it's a huge leap for me to say that it gives him an advantage over Perdue. On the other hand, if I consider the on-the-ground dynamics, the advantage does seem to go to the two Democrats, because the way Trump and his crazy advocates have behaved since the early November election threatens to possibly depress the Republican vote. When you are telling people that their votes don't matter because the system is rigged, while simultaneously you tell them you want them to show up to vote, well, you can understand why a number of people may decide it isn't worth their time and effort. Meanwhile, the Democratic turnout is rumored to be very promising, and the polls have consistently shown a meaningful, if admittedly slight advantage to Warnock and Ossoff. I'll end by saying that I sincerely hope what is unknown about these charts turns out to be favorable to Ossoff and Warnock, but I also have to say that based on what is known, I can't say that Democrats are going to win both those seats. One maybe, but on the known astrology, it's more likely that Republicans win both seats than that Democrats win both the races. But of course, I will be so happy to be completely mistaken in my somewhat pessimistic leaning. In fact, I will be delighted, jubilant, ecstatic, doing cartwheels on the street if both Ossoff and Warnock were to emerge triumphant. So, may their birth times make this possible.